Well, thank you, Mark, for joining me today. I'm looking forward to hear about your history in the winemaking industry and also about Sebastiani Wines.
Yeah, glad to be here, Oscar. So quick little bit, I guess, about me for background for your listeners. I've grown up in agriculture all my life. I grew up in southeastern Washington, just outside of Walla Walla, great wine region of its own. My family were farmers, ranchers, so we did alfalfa, wheat, hay, cattle as well, and did that basically, pretty much all growing up. So I like to say my first harvest was when I was like 5 years old, so in agriculture. So I've always been part of that industry. I love it. I love the physical aspect of it. I love being kind of working with Mother Nature because it's, something new every year. This year in particular for harvest, it definitely applies. And then not the typical pedigree for winemakers. I did study science in college. I was a geologist. And after geology had completed and my degree had finished up, I joined the Peace Corps. I was in East Africa for 2.5 years doing soil conservation work in Tanzania. And when I came back to Washington, the wine industry had really exploded, and I saw that as a huge opportunity to combine a lot of the loves of my life. One being agriculture, I still wanted to stick with that. Then obviously my science got to justify the degree. And the wine industry had just been exploding in the area. So it was like, this is the perfect combination of all those things. And I was able to add an art side to my profession as well, because art is certainly part of the winemaking process. So it was really a combination of all those factors that really led me to the wine industry. And I worked in Washington at Columbia Crest Winery in my first harvest in 2000, and then moved down to Napa to work with Villa Mount Eden and Con Creek for a few years. And then I was at Carducci for nearly a dozen years up in Mendocino County. And then got a wild hair and became winemaker at Maui Wine and moved myself and my family out to the island of Maui. They do grow grapes out there and did some pretty incredible stuff. Made some great wines, also got the approval for the first AVA, American Viticultural Area in the state of Hawaii for the vineyard that was out there. So it's like writing a wonderful 26-page term paper, and TTB recognized it. And then moved back to California to get back into it. And so I joined Valley of the Moon Winery in Sonoma, where I'd always wanted to be. And then eventually ended up here at Sebastiani as winemaker in December of 2020. And I'm happy to be here.
Man, well, that's such a great trajectory from your upbringing to moving to Hawaii, being part of the, registering the AVA and so forth. I mean, those are huge milestones in your career. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks, Oscar. Yeah.
And when you say Sebastiani, do we say Sebastiani? Do we have to do the fingers, the gestures? What do we do?
I'd say you don't have to do that. However you say it, just as long as you drink the wine, go for it. Hey.
Exactly. Well, awesome. So what are we going to be drinking first?
So first wine up for us is the 2019 North Coast Cabernet. This is the blend out of the North Coast county, so primarily Sonoma County, but then also Lake County, Mendocino County, and even a little bit of Napa County in there as well. So those all apply for the North Coast recognized area. And a combination of 77% Cabernet, about 11% Merlot, 9% Malbec, and then a few other kind of mixed varieties in there as well. And just really trying to encapsulate, the attitude of Cabernet within those regions. And then the Malbec and the Merlot kind of playing a supporting role, adding a little bit of spice from the Merlot. The Merlot comes out of Sonoma County, usually has this kind of cinnamon, kind of potpourri note that will come to it. And then the Malbec's just the pure, lovely, fun fruit bomb to kind of provide some baseline to the wine as well.
Got it.
I'm curious what you think of this one, Oscar.
Well, it just smells amazing. Beautiful aromatics.
Yeah, I certainly wanted something that would pop out of the glass. For people, varietal authenticity is very important to me. So I still want it to smell, of course, like Cabernet, but this being, our wholesale wine that you might find on the shelf for between $15 and $18 a bottle. I wanted it also to be very, very approachable. So it's kind of a pop and pour style is what I would call it.
Okay.
4 or 5 years, this will definitely stand up to that. And I think it's just incredible value for what you're getting in the glass. So I was really happy with how this one turned out. 2019 was a great vintage, warm vintage, a little bit late too. So got some wonderful phenolics, good ripeness to it, plenty of attitude and lushness on top of it, and drink up.
Man, this is beautiful. I like the balanced acidity on this is very nice with the tannins, right? Beautiful finish at the end. I pick up a lot of that blackberry and that cherry. That's like very prevalent on the nose. Man,
yeah, definitely that black cherry. Yeah, a little bit of spice elements on it as well. The oak use in this is more or less something for the background. I like to think of oak as being kind of the framework for the picture, okay, not really inside the picture so much as sometimes it can be utilized elsewhere. It's just more or less to provide a frame of reference, kind of capture the tannins and smooth out the tannins that we're looking for. Mm-hmm. And so there's just about 15% new French oak, and then actually about 10% Hungarian oak, which is something that I like to experiment with a little bit. There's more of a kind of coffee toffee, think of like a Heath bar almost, if you will, that the toasting of Hungarian oak kind of presents. We make probably between 50 and 60,000 cases of this, so it's a good volume that's out there. So it's what we call a wholesale kind of level where you're finding in some stores and retailers that has a pretty good spread across the United States.
I mean, this is such a great value for a cab coming from Northern California, right? I mean, where do you get that? This is spectacular. I've never looked at your list price for any of your wines. So I was shocked when you said that. I was like, wait a minute, did you say like $15, $16? I'm like, what? Wow, this is good. I mean, for the retail masses, I mean, this is definitely almost like a daily wine you can have. It's so approachable. And what's one of the pairings that you suggest to do with this wine when it comes to food? What do you pair it with?
This one I want it to be, this isn't going to be full on ribeye kind of style, because I think the tannins on the softer side for this.
Right.
Some of the ones we'll taste later, that's more of the element that's there for it. But I'd say this is your burger and your ribs coming off the grill. Kind of, I think of this as being a jovial type of wine. And so I think it's served best in those environments when you're with friends, have a few bottles of this open, kind of going with stuff that's coming off the grill, that is kind of non-pretentious environment type food is what I would say. And I'm a carnivore, so I usually do a lot of food pairings with meat included in it, which is, sorry to my vegetarian friends that are out there, but this is Cabernet. It pairs well with a lot of the fatter sort of elements that are out there.
You did. That's what I was thinking. This is it's not a full body based cab like the rest of your lineup that we're going to be drinking and tasting shortly. But this is definitely would pair great with those little burgers, some chicken wings, something that's very savory, because of the light tannin. It's very soft on it, right? It just pairs perfectly. I think it'll be something for this weekend for me to think about where I'm going to enjoy that bottle with. So
there you go. Yeah, it is Friday, so there you go.
Yeah, exactly. So what is next on the tasting?
19 Alexander Valley. Alexander Valley, those that maybe don't know Sonoma so well, is northern part of Sonoma County. So as you go further north, it's kind of ironic, but as you go further north, you get a little bit warmer in Sonoma County because a lot of Sonoma Valley and say even Carneros, the regions that are the southern part of the county of Sonoma County, their weather is influenced more by like San Francisco. So you get this kind of maritime influence that comes up from the bay, goes up north into those, kind of southern portions of Sonoma County. But Alexander Valley is further north. And so more of its weather patterns and influence actually comes from the north, and it brings a bit of a warmer climate to it. So you get a certain level of decadence to the wines, a little bit less on levels of acidity is what I've seen. And then a lot of our vineyards that are out in that area, because with, the company that owns Sebastiani is Foley Family Wines. And fully owns a number of vineyards throughout California and quite a bit within Sonoma County. And a lot of our Alexander Valley vineyards are actually these hillsides. And hillside and mountain terraces typically mean high level of intensity, smaller berry sizes. Mm-hmm. And with a red wine, you're fermenting on skins. So the smaller that the berries are, they're actually makes for a bigger style of wine because there's more surface area of the berry versus the volume of the pulp. And so you get smaller berries means a bigger style wine. And so that's what we get out of Alexander Valley. This one's a Cab, of course, but we also have some Syrah and Petit Verdot and a little bit of Merlot and Petit Syrah blended in there as well. I want to have this wine to have plenty of power, but certainly some decadence and some elegance to it. And I think we hit the mark pretty well with this one.
And this grows on a hillside?
Yep, primarily this is off of hillsides, so you get that kind of level of exposure, particularly if you have kind of more of a western exposure as the sun is setting. And so you tend to get these kind of more intense, darker kind of fruit elements to it. Whereas, the North Coast Cab had a little bit of more red fruit, I would say. There's kind of some strawberry notes that were in there along with the spice, almost strawberry preserve. This is a little bit more darker with those elements and maybe even some plum and some black cherry that kind of comes through for me.
You're right. I think you get those hints of the strawberry and you get the plum, right? That comes through very good. And what would be another pairing you would do with this wine?
So this one, with kind of the darker elements and the plum, I almost think of like a Bushu plum sauce. So kind of pick your element that would fit with that. I think that sort of sweet and savory element that comes with that sauce pairs very well with this food where they can be quite complementary. There is a bit of tannin that's with this wine, but didn't do anything with the extended maceration. We didn't leave the wine on the skins post-fermentation completion to extract extra tannin because the idea was not to get into that rough kind of realm. Wanted to make something that was powerful and showed decadence and richness, but then also some opulence such that it could pair with food as well. And so I think the Mushu plum sauce is just, you pick what you want to be cooking with that. I think it pairs very well with that. Just having that sweet and savory, it's a slam dunk with this wine. We're trying to make these all, again, back to varietal authenticity. I want it to smell and taste like Cabernet, and that's what the consumer is experiencing, but also to capture the area as well. Alexander Valley being a little bit warmer, there's more of a richer sort of element to this one. The alcohol creeps up a little bit. We're pushing 14.8, 14.9 on the alcohol on this one. So it's a little bit more of a fuller style, if you will, to support that alcohol that's present that's there. And I think that kind of captures what Alexander Valley is about. It's a warmer site. You should see a little bit less acidity than you would from the cooler spots. And then also a little bit more richness along with the kind of the alcohol coming in just a little bit higher. Because we pick a little bit riper for the sugars. And that, of course, converts to your alcohol as well. So, because our goal is to have the best wine out of each one of those regions. And we're pushing the envelope on it to get the word out there as well. Love that part of it, man. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Now we're going to get to our final wine. Yeah. And this is CherryBlock 2018 Cabernet Sauvignon. All right. This is
So CherryBlock, a little bit. There's some history that's there. So the Sebastiani brand has been around since 1904 for a long time. And the vineyard that is CherryBlock was originally a cherry orchard that they planted in 1917. So over 100 years ago. And then in the 1960s, the early 1960s, the family took out the cherry orchard and planted a Cabernet. And the clone is never been really known what that clone was. So it became a heritage clone. It was very, very unique. And so it's known as the Heritage CherryBlock clone. And so those vines from 1961 still produce. And most vines, they're kind of at their best stage in terms of production and volume, when they're kind of in their teen years to maybe 20. So the fact that these were planted in 1961 and still producing is absolutely fantastic. And what I love about CherryBlock from these vines in particular is they're very consistent. These vines have been running the marathon that they run for a long, long period of time. So if you get a vintage that's very, very different, say like 2011 or 2018 with the volume, there's still this level of consistency because the vine's just kind of like, whatever, man, I've seen these conditions before, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And that's those deep roots. It's just a very wonderful thing to have access to as a winemaker, to have a consistent condition of how the fruit comes out. And so this one for the 2018, it comes off of, there's several blocks that are out there in CherryBlock, but the majority always comes off of those old vines. And there's just these huge, massive trunks to them. Very low yield, incredibly small berries, and typically very high acidity, which is not like, used to be more vogue, I think back in probably the 70s and the 80s. And then as the 90s and the 2000s came around, people were looking for softer, less acidic wines, and kind of got away from that. And I think the pendulum swung a little bit too far for my side of things. If wines don't have enough acidity, they typically don't last very long. They're not going to age very long. CherryBlock, the hallmark of it is it's something that can age. And so I've tasted wines from the 1980s, and the 1982 CherryBlock, it's still got a long life ahead of it, which is incredible. And so the idea is to make a wine that still retains that level of acidity, showcases the fruit that comes off of the property, and have something that you can lay down for your kid's birth year. And that's really what the approach is with this one. So CherryBlock, deep purple, a lot of like that creme de cassis is really kind of what we're aiming for. And then it may sound trite, but there's definitely a ton of cherry that's in there as well. And a little bit of that spice element, there's some potpourri in there as well. A lot of earth on this one as well. 2018 was kind of a voluptuous vintage in terms of the volume. So it was a very, very late year. This stuff was picked between mid-October all the way to the beginning of November. And so by way of comparison to this year, 2022, a lot of Cabernet is coming off now, just being mid-September because we had these kind of warm conditions. So vintage was much, much later. Good level of acidity that's to it when you taste it. And just a lot of that kind of earth element that sort of makes you feel a bit more of a, call it old world style. And somebody that was maybe tasting Bordeaux would be very familiar with some of the aromatics and the flavors that come off of it. I would not consider this to be a big beastly style wine, even though it's a high-end wine. Sometimes people assume that's what we're aiming for. That's not CherryBlock. CherryBlock is about ageability, and it's a relationship between the acidity, the tannin, and also the fruit structure that's going to be existing there as well. A bit more oak use on this one, but kind of like, I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones. You remember the Mountain, the big guy?
Right.
That dude could wear a suit of armor and he could support it because he had the musculature to support it. Other wines, if you throw a high level of oak at it and it doesn't have the structure or the power to hold up to it, all you experience is the oak, and they're not into proportion with each other. So even though the oak use is a little bit higher on this wine, it's done intently because the fruit can support it. So this one's 94% Cabernet, 4% Merlot, and 2% Malbec. And the Malbec's an interesting piece because part of CherryBlock, the Cabernet was planted in 1961. The Malbec was planted more in the 1990s, but the Malbec was off a portion of CherryBlock that's known as the Mission Block. And the Mission Block is because it was when the final mission, the northernmost mission, was established in Northern California. That was around 1824. The Padres also planted a vineyard, and that was the Mission Block. And so this vineyard is coming up on 200 years of continuous history of agriculture on it, which is probably the oldest continually operated vineyard in the United States that succeeded, that has continued all through the years. Now, the vineyard's been replanted over the years. These vines are not 200 years old, but that property and that ground has supported 200 years of grapes growing on it, which I think is something of note. And the Malbec that comes off of it always has this kind of beautiful, very purple fruit element that comes to it. I think it was a good support for to kind of balance out the Cabernet that was coming off the property from this year. I think with CherryBlock too, I think that's the wine to really, if you have the time, break out the decanter. And if you show enough restraint, which is rare in my household, let it, what the other half of the bottle does the following day. Because I think with 24 hours of air, this wine really improves. So between 24 and 48 hours, it needs some time to, again, use the term, go through its yoga poses. There's a big, this is like an onion that you have to keep peeling back layers. And so those initial aromatics that you're going to get are going to change and modify as they kind of volatilize off as they come to room temperature. And then there's going to be more that's hiding underneath there that I think a patient person will be able to find. And it creates for a very a cerebral type of tasting experience because you're going to be getting new and different things all the time. And it's really a fun fireside thinking person's wine that you really just kind of want to dial into and really kind of open up your senses to experience all of what's in there, because there's a lot going on. And actually, I've got a solution to the problem of not being patient enough. Just open 2 bottles. So one for today, one for tomorrow.
Exactly. Well, I really appreciate your time, Mark. I really love the in-depth conversation of the blends you put together. They definitely stand out all on their own. None of the wines that we taste today have any similarity to them. They're very unique. And I love that because sometimes I think winemakers could get lost in it. They just, when they do mass production, and they kind of have a lot of similar hints to them. And these definitely stand up on their own. And great wines. I'm definitely sold on them. And I really enjoyed my conversation with you and giving me the history of the Sebastiani and that whole passion to get this wine out to the public for us to enjoy.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Oscar. Dig the shirt, man. Wine guy. Dig it. But yeah, thanks for all the questions and the interest. And yeah, hopefully post-harvest we can go hang out in person and try some more stuff.
So that'll be awesome, man. I know everyone's busy with harvest.
Yeah.
So I'm planning to visit after, which is probably gonna be sometime in October. Hopefully, are you guys gonna be done by then?
Yeah, I think so. We're probably gonna be finishing up at the end of this month. Stuff's gotta come in. We had that heat spike and then we got some rain coming. So it's go time. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, awesome, Mark. Thanks again for your time. Have a great weekend.